The blood pooling in her right boot had long since soaked through to her skin, and Teresa Vaughn knew if she did not find help within the next hour, she would collapse on this dusty California trail and never rise again. The sun beat down mercilessly on Angels Camp's outskirts this scorching afternoon in July of 1878, and every step sent fresh agony shooting up her wounded leg, where the stagecoach robber's bullet had torn through her calf during the attack 3 miles back. She pressed one trembling hand against the rough bark of a pine tree, breathing hard, her vision swimming with dark spots that threatened to pull her under. The other passengers had scattered like quail when the shooting started, and she had stumbled into the forest, listening to the bandits argue over the strongbox while her life leaked out onto the pine needles beneath her feet. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze, terror gripping her chest. Had they followed her? She tried to move faster, but her injured leg buckled, sending her stumbling forward. She caught herself against another tree, leaving a dark red handprint on the pale bark. The hoofbeats grew closer, and she forced herself to keep moving, limping badly now, her breath coming in harsh gasps. Her dark hair had fallen from its pins during the attack, hanging in tangled waves around her face, and her traveling dress was torn and dusty, the hem soaked dark with blood. "Madam," the voice came from behind her, deep and concerned. "Madam, you need to stop before you hurt yourself worse." Teresa turned, swaying dangerously, and found herself looking up at a tall cowboy sitting astride a magnificent roan horse. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat and striking blue eyes that widened as they took in her condition. His strong jaw was set with concern, and he was already swinging down from his saddle before she could speak. "I am not going back," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "You cannot make me." "Back where?" He approached her slowly, hands raised slightly as if she were a spooked animal. "Madam, I do not know what happened to you, but you are bleeding badly and walking like every step might be your last." "I am not here to harm you." "The stagecoach," she said, and then her legs finally gave out entirely. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady. "Easy now, I have got you. Get on before you fall the rest of the way," he said, though she was already in his arms. Up close, she could see the honest concern in his face, the weathered tan of someone who spent his days outdoors, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "My name is Vincent Jameson. I work the ranch about 2 miles east of here. Can you tell me what happened?" "Stage robbers," Teresa gasped out. "They stopped us on the road to Angels Camp. Started shooting when the driver tried to make a run for it. I got hit and ran into the trees." Vincent's expression darkened. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. I did not wait to count." Her head was spinning and she fought to stay conscious. "The other passengers scattered. I do not know if anyone else was hurt. We need to get that bleeding stopped and get you to town." He lifted her carefully, and she bit back a cry as the movement jarred her injured leg. "This is going to hurt, but I need to get you up on shadow here. Can you hold on to me?" Teresa nodded, not trusting her voice. Vincent lifted her as gently as he could, settling her sideways on his horse before swinging up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her securely against his chest, and she found herself leaning into his warmth despite herself. Shadow started forward at a steady walk, and Vincent kept one hand on the reins while the other stayed firmly around her middle. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Talk to me. Tell me your name." "Teresa Vaughn." Her voice sounded far away to her own ears. "I was coming from Sacramento. My aunt lives in Angels Camp. She is expecting me." "What is your aunt's name? I might know her." "Margaret Hutchins. She runs the boarding house on Main Street." Vincent's voice held a note of relief. "I know Miss Margaret. Good woman. She has been in Angel's camp for years. We will get you to her, Teresa. Just stay awake for me." The ride that followed blurred together in Teresa's mind. She was aware of Vincent's steady presence behind her, his voice asking her questions to keep her conscious, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them. She told him about her life in Sacramento, how her parents had died of fever the previous winter, how her aunt had invited her to make a fresh start in Angel's camp. He told her about his ranch, how he had come west from Missouri 5 years ago, how he was riding into town for supplies when he heard the shots and came to investigate. "Almost there," Vincent said as they emerged from the tree line onto the main road. Teresa could see the buildings of Angel's camp ahead, the afternoon sun glinting off windows. "Doc Harrison will fix you right up." But as they entered the town, Vincent steered Shadow directly toward a neat white building with a sign reading Harrison Medical Practice. He dismounted quickly, then carefully lifted Teresa down, cradling her against his chest as he strode toward the door. "Doc," he called out, shouldering the door open. "Doc Harrison, I need you." A gray-haired man emerged from a back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. His eyes widened as he took in Teresa's condition. "Bring her through to the examination room." "What happened?" "Gunshot wound to the leg. Stage robbery on the road from Sacramento." Vincent laid Teresa gently on the examination table, and she could not suppress a whimper as her injured leg made contact with the hard surface. "When did this happen?" Doc Harrison was already cutting away the blood-soaked fabric of her skirt, exposing the ugly wound. "Maybe an hour ago," Teresa managed. "Maybe less. You have lost a fair amount of blood, young lady, but I have seen worse." The doctor's voice was calm and professional. "Vincent, I will need you to hold her still. This is going to hurt." What followed was the most intense pain Teresa had ever experienced. She felt Vincent's strong hands on her shoulders, heard his voice telling her to squeeze his hand as hard as she needed to, felt the doctor probing the wound. She tried to be brave, tried not to cry out, but when Doc Harrison began removing the bullet, she could not stop the scream that tore from her throat. Vincent's hand found hers, his fingers interlacing with hers, and she gripped it with desperate strength. "Almost done," Doc Harrison said. "There we go. Bullet is out, clean through the muscle, missed the bone. You are a lucky woman, Miss Vaughn." Teresa was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but the worst was over. She felt the doctor cleaning and bandaging the wound, felt the blessed coolness of something being pressed to her forehead. When she finally opened her eyes, Vincent was still there, his face creased with concern. "You did well," he said softly. "The hard part is over." "She will need rest and time to heal," Doc Harrison said, washing his hands in a basin. "No walking on that leg for at least a week, then only with crutches for another week after that. She is going to need somewhere to stay and someone to look after her." "Her aunt runs the boarding house," Vincent said. "Margaret Hutchins." "Ah, good. Margaret will take excellent care of her." Doc Harrison turned to Teresa with a kind smile. "You will mend just fine, young lady. The wound is clean and you are young and healthy. Just follow my instructions and do not try to do too much too soon." "Thank you, doctor," Teresa said, her voice weak. Vincent paid the doctor before Teresa could protest, then carefully lifted her again. "Let us get you to your aunt's place." The boarding house was only a few buildings down, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. Vincent carried Teresa up the steps and knocked on the door with his boot since his hands were full. A moment later, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying blonde hair opened the door. "Vincent Jameson, what on earth, Teresa?" Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, my dear child, what has happened?" "Stage robbery," Vincent explained as Margaret ushered them inside. She took a bullet to the leg. Doc Harrison has patched her up, but she needs rest and care. Margaret led them upstairs to a sunny room with yellow curtains and a comfortable-looking bed. Vincent laid Teresa down gently, and Margaret immediately began fussing over her, smoothing her hair back, tucking a quilt around her. "You poor darling. What a terrible welcome to Angel's Camp. Do not you worry about a thing. I will take good care of you." She turned to Vincent with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for bringing her to me, Vincent. You may have saved her life. I just happened to be in the right place." Vincent looked down at Teresa, and something in his expression made her heart flutter despite her exhaustion. "I should let you rest. Your aunt will take good care of you." "Wait," Teresa said as he turned to leave. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything." He gave her a small smile that transformed his serious face. "Rest up, Teresa Vaughn. I will check on you in a day or two if that is all right with you." "I would like that," she found herself saying. After he left, Aunt Margaret helped Teresa out of her ruined clothes and into a clean nightgown, chattering all the while about how Angel's Camp was usually such a safe place. How shocking it was that robbers had attacked the stage. How thankful she was that Vincent had found Teresa. But Teresa's mind kept drifting back to the tall cowboy with the gentle hands and concerned blue eyes, the way he had held her so carefully, the warmth of his voice telling her to stay awake. She slept fitfully that first night, her leg throbbing despite the laudanum Doc Harrison had provided. When she woke in the gray light of dawn, she found her aunt dozing in a chair beside the bed, and the sight brought tears to her eyes. She had been alone for so long after her parents died, navigating her grief in isolation. Having family again, being cared for, felt like a blessing she had not realized she needed so desperately. The next few days passed in a haze of healing and rest. Aunt Margaret proved to be an attentive nurse, bringing meals on trays, changing bandages, reading aloud from the newspaper. Doc Harrison came to check on Teresa twice, pronouncing himself satisfied with her progress. And on the third day, true to his word, Vincent Jameson came to call. Teresa heard his voice downstairs, speaking with her aunt, and found herself suddenly concerned about her appearance. She was wearing a borrowed dressing gown, her hair brushed but hanging loose around her shoulders, still confined to bed. When Aunt Margaret showed Vincent into the room, Teresa felt her cheeks flush. "I hope I am not intruding," Vincent said, hat in his hands. He looked freshly scrubbed, his dark hair still damp, wearing clean clothes. "I wanted to see how you were recovering." "Much better, thanks to you," Teresa said. "Please sit down. My aunt has been taking wonderful care of me, and Doc Harrison says I am healing well." Vincent settled into the chair beside her bed, looking almost shy. "I am glad to hear it. The whole town has been talking about the stage robbery. The sheriff organized a posse, but they lost the trail after about 10 miles. They got away clean, unfortunately. With the strongbox and whatever the other passengers were carrying, I imagine." Teresa sighed. "I lost my traveling bag with most of my things. Not that it matters compared to my life." "No, it does not." Vincent leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Teresa, I have been thinking about what happened, about how you managed to make it as far as you did with that injury. You have a strong spirit." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Every step I was sure I would fall and not get back up. And then I heard your horse, and I thought you were one of the robbers coming to finish what they started. I cannot imagine how frightened you must have been." His hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped. "I am just grateful I came along when I did." They talked for over an hour, and Teresa found herself enjoying his company immensely. Vincent was thoughtful and observant, with a quiet sense of humor that made her laugh despite her injuries. He told her about his ranch, how he had built it up from nothing over the past 5 years, how he ran cattle and had just started breeding horses. She told him about her life in Sacramento, her work as a schoolteacher before her parents died, her love of reading and music. "You taught school." Vincent's eyes lit up. Angel's Camp has been trying to get a proper school established for years. We have a little one-room building, but the last teacher left 6 months ago to get married. The children have been making do with whatever education their parents can provide. "I would love to teach again," Teresa said slowly. "Once I heal, of course, if the town would have me. If the town would have you, they would be thrilled." Vincent grinned, and Teresa's heart did that strange little flutter again. "I will mention it to the mayor." He has been desperate to find someone qualified. Aunt Margaret appeared in the doorway with a tray of tea and cookies, her eyes twinkling as she looked between them. "I thought you two might like some refreshments. Teresa, dear, do not let this young man tire you out too much." "I should probably be going anyway," Vincent said, standing. "I have chores waiting back at the ranch. But Teresa, would it be all right if I came to visit again?" "Please do," Teresa said, and meant it with all her heart. After he left, Aunt Margaret gave her a knowing look. "That is a good man, Teresa. One of the best in Angel's Camp. There are plenty of young ladies who have set their caps for him over the years, but he has never shown interest in any of them. Until now, perhaps." Teresa felt her cheeks warm. "He was just being kind, Aunt Margaret. He would have helped anyone he found injured on that trail." "Oh, he would have helped, certainly. But he would not be visiting again, bringing you news about teaching positions, looking at you the way he was looking at you." Margaret patted her hand with a smile. "Just you wait and see, dear. I know the signs." Vincent did come back, 2 days later, and then 3 days after that, and then it became a regular pattern. He would finish his ranch work in the early afternoon and ride into town, spending an hour or two sitting by Teresa's bedside. They talked about everything and nothing. He brought her books from the small collection at his ranch, wildflowers he had picked on his rides, once a perfect eagle feather he had found. She found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit, her heart lifting at the sound of his boots on the stairs. When Doc Harrison finally declared her well enough to get out of bed with crutches, Vincent was there to help her learn to maneuver on them. He stood close, ready to catch her if she stumbled, his hands hovering near her waist. The first time she made it across the room and back, he applauded like she had accomplished something magnificent. "Look at you," he said, pride evident in his voice. "You will be dancing by autumn." "I have never been much of a dancer," Teresa confessed. "2 left feet, according to my mother." "Then we will have to change that." The words were out before Vincent seemed to realize what he was saying, and he cleared his throat, looking suddenly bashful. "I mean when you are fully healed. Angel's Camp has dances fairly regularly. It would be a shame for you to miss out." 2 weeks after the robbery, Teresa was finally able to come downstairs for dinner. Aunt Margaret had invited Vincent to join them, and he arrived with his hair carefully combed and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. They ate roast chicken with vegetables from Margaret's garden, and the conversation flowed easily. Teresa learned that Vincent had a younger sister back in Missouri, who wrote him long letters about her life as a farmer's wife, that he loved thunderstorms, that his dream was to breed the finest horses in California. After dinner, they sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent had positioned himself on the bench beside Teresa, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "I spoke to Mayor Jenkins about the teaching position," Vincent said. "He would like to meet with you when you are feeling up to it, but he basically told me the job is yours if you want it. The town will provide a small salary and living quarters in the back room of the schoolhouse." "Really?" Teresa turned to him, eyes shining. "Oh, Vincent, that is wonderful news. I have missed teaching so much. The children will be lucky to have you." His voice was soft, and when Teresa met his eyes, she saw something there that made her breath catch. "Teresa, I know this might not be the right time, and if I am speaking out of turn, please tell me. But these past few weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant more to me than I can properly express." Teresa's heart was racing. "It has meant a great deal to me as well." "I have never been good with words," Vincent continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "I am better with horses and cattle than people most days, but there is something about you that makes me want to try. You are brave and kind and intelligent, and when you smile, it is like the sun coming out. I know we have not known each other long, but I would very much like to court you properly, if you would allow it." The hope and vulnerability in his face undid her completely. Teresa reached out and took his hand, feeling his fingers close around hers. "I would like that very much, Vincent." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Truly, truly." She squeezed his hand. "You saved my life that day on the trail, but you have given me something more than that these past weeks. You have given me hope and friendship, and I would very much like to see where this leads." Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You have made me very happy, Teresa Vaughn." Aunt Margaret chose that moment to step onto the porch with a lantern, and her face broke into a delighted smile when she saw them holding hands. "Well, it is about time," she declared. "I was beginning to think you two were going to dance around each other forever. Vincent, you should stay for coffee and pie." The courtship that followed was everything Teresa could have hoped for. As her leg continued to heal, Vincent took her on gentle walks through town, shortening his stride to match her careful steps. He introduced her to everyone they met, his pride evident as he spoke of her plans to teach at the school. They attended church services together on Sundays, sitting in the pew beside Aunt Margaret, their shoulders touching. Vincent took her to see his ranch, helping her up into his wagon for the ride out of town. The ranch was modest but well kept, with a sturdy house Vincent had built himself, a barn and several corrals. He showed her his small herd of cattle, the horses he was training, the garden he had been attempting to cultivate with mixed success. Teresa could see the care he put into everything, the pride he took in what he had built. "It is not much yet," Vincent said as they stood at the corral fence, watching the horses graze. "But I have plans to expand. In a few more years, if things go well, it could be quite prosperous." "I think it is wonderful," Teresa said honestly. "You have built all of this yourself. That is remarkable." Vincent turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her heart skip. "Teresa, I need to be honest with you about something. When I said I wanted to court you, it was not just because I find you pleasant company. From the moment I saw you on that trail, bleeding and scared but still fighting to keep going, something changed in me. I know this might sound foolish, but I think I started falling in love with you that very first day." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes. "That does not sound foolish at all, because I have been falling in love with you too, Vincent. Every visit, every conversation, every moment we spend together, I fall a little deeper." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers softly, sweetly, a kiss full of promise and tenderness. Teresa's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I love you, Teresa," Vincent said, resting his forehead against hers. "I know it has only been weeks, but I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," she replied, joy singing through her veins. "I love you so much, Vincent." They stood there in the summer sunshine, holding each other, and Teresa marveled at how her life had changed. She had come to Angel's Camp expecting a quiet new start, a chance to heal from her grief. She had never imagined finding love, especially not like this, not so sudden and sure and right. In August, Teresa began teaching at the Angels Camp School. The first day, Vincent helped her arrange the classroom, moving desks and hanging up the maps and charts she had ordered from Sacramento with her first salary payment. 14 children showed up that morning, ranging in age from 6 to 14, all eager to learn. Teresa fell back into teaching like putting on a comfortable old dress, and she loved every minute of it. Vincent attended the town council meeting, where it was announced that the stage robbers had finally been caught attempting to rob a bank in Stockton. Teresa felt a wave of relief knowing they were behind bars, that particular nightmare truly over. As autumn arrived, painting the hills around Angel's Camp in shades of gold and russet, Vincent began spending more and more time at the boarding house. He would arrive for dinner several times a week, sometimes helping Aunt Margaret with repairs around the property, other times simply sitting with Teresa on the porch swing as the evening cooled. They talked about their days, their dreams, their pasts. Teresa learned about Vincent's difficult childhood, how his father had been a harsh man, how coming west had been an escape as much as an opportunity. Vincent learned about Teresa's parents, how much she missed them, how teaching reminded her of her mother who had also been a teacher. In October, Angel's Camp held its autumn dance in the community hall. Vincent arrived at the boarding house dressed in a suit Teresa had never seen him wear before, looking so handsome it took her breath away. He had gotten a haircut for the occasion, and he smelled of bay rum and soap. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw Teresa in her blue dress, the nicest thing she owned. Aunt Margaret had helped her arrange her hair in an elegant updo with small white flowers woven through it. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Jameson," Teresa teased. At the dance, Vincent proved to be an excellent dancer despite his claims otherwise, guiding Teresa smoothly through reels and waltzes. Her leg ached a bit by the end of the evening, but she would not have traded the experience for anything. Being held in Vincent's arms as they moved together to the music, seeing the love shining in his eyes when he looked down at her, felt like the most natural thing in the world. As the evening wound down and they stepped outside for some fresh air, Vincent took both of Teresa's hands in his. "Teresa, I have been thinking about our future, about my future, about what I want from life." "And what do you want?" she asked softly. "You. Every day for the rest of my life I want you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Teresa Vaughn, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire, the color of the California sky. Teresa felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes. Yes, Vincent, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that left them both breathless. Around them, other dancers who had stepped outside began to applaud and call out congratulations. Vincent laughed against her lips, then swept her up in his arms and spun her around. She said yes. He announced to anyone who would listen. "She is going to marry me." Aunt Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face radiant with joy. "About time, young man. I was beginning to think you were going to wait until Christmas." The wedding was planned for December, giving Teresa time to finish the autumn school term and prepare. The women of Angel's Camp rallied around her, helping her sew her wedding dress, teaching her recipes, offering advice about marriage and running a household. Vincent spent his free time adding a room onto his ranch house, determined to have everything perfect before he brought his bride home. They were married on a crisp December morning in Angel's Camp's small church, with Aunt Margaret standing beside Teresa and Vincent's ranch hand and friend, Carl, standing up with him. Doc Harrison was there, along with the mayor, the sheriff, and what seemed like half the town. Teresa wore a dress of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, and Vincent could barely speak his vows for the emotion thick in his throat. "I promise to love you all the days of my life," he managed, his voice rough. "To stand beside you through whatever comes. You are my miracle, Teresa, and I will spend every day trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Teresa said, tears streaming freely down her face. "You have from the very beginning. I promise to love you with all my heart, to build a life with you, to be your partner in everything. You saved me in more ways than one, Vincent, and I will never stop being grateful that you came along that trail when you did." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Teresa with such tenderness that several of the watching women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception afterward was held at the boarding house, with food and dancing and toasts to the happy couple. As the afternoon faded to evening, Vincent and Teresa slipped away to begin their journey to the ranch and their new life together. The ranch house was warm and welcoming when they arrived, with a fire already crackling in the hearth. Carl had tactfully made himself scarce, agreeing to sleep in the barn for the night. Vincent carried Teresa over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, then set her down gently and just looked at her for a long moment. "My wife," he said wonderingly. "Mrs. Teresa Jameson." "Your wife," she agreed, reaching up to cup his face. "I love the sound of that." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered promises and gentle discoveries. Teresa had been nervous, but Vincent was patient and loving, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the wind outside and the occasional sound of the horses in the barn. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Happier than I ever imagined being," Teresa said honestly. "When I think about that day on the trail, how close I came to dying and how it led to this, to us, it is like something out of a story." "The best story," Vincent murmured, kissing her forehead, "and we are just at the beginning." That winter was one of the happiest times of Teresa's life. She continued teaching through January and February, then decided to take a break in March when she discovered she was pregnant. Vincent was overjoyed at the news, immediately becoming protective and attentive, insisting she rest more, bringing her breakfast in bed even though she was perfectly capable of getting up. "I am having a baby, not dying," Teresa laughed one morning as he fussed over her. "You are carrying our child," Vincent said seriously. "The most precious thing in the world. Let me take care of you." How could she argue with that? So she let him dote on her, even though she felt perfectly fine. They spent long evenings sitting together, Vincent with his hand on her growing belly, talking to the baby, telling it about the ranch and the horses and how much they already loved it. Their son was born in November of 1879, after a long labor that had Vincent pacing holes in the floor downstairs, while Aunt Margaret and the midwife attended Teresa. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly fell over with relief. The midwife called him up, and he entered the room to find Teresa exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," Teresa said, her voice tired but full of love. Vincent approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving one miniature fist in the air. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, reaching out a finger for the baby to grasp. "Absolutely perfect. You are perfect. Teresa, thank you." They named him Samuel Vincent Jameson, and he became the center of their world. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk with Samuel when he cried. singing to him in a deep, rumbling voice that somehow always soothed the baby. Teresa watched her husband cradle their son and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it sometimes took her breath away. Teresa returned to teaching when Samuel was 6 months old, with Aunt Margaret offering to watch the baby during school hours. The arrangement worked beautifully. Samuel was a happy, easy baby who seemed to enjoy the bustle of the boarding house. In the afternoons, Teresa would collect him and return to the ranch, where Vincent would sweep them both up in enthusiastic greetings. Life settled into a rhythm that felt perfect. The ranch continued to prosper. Vincent's horse breeding operation was gaining a reputation for quality animals, and buyers came from as far as Sacramento to purchase his stock. Teresa's school enrollment grew as more families moved to Angel's Camp, drawn by the silver mining in the surrounding hills. They saved money, made improvements to the ranch, attended church on Sundays, and spent their evenings as a family. When Samuel was 2, Teresa discovered she was pregnant again. This time Vincent was calmer about it, though no less attentive. Their daughter, Elizabeth Margaret Jameson, was born in the summer of 1882. She had Teresa's dark eyes and Vincent's serious expression, and Samuel immediately declared himself her protector. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel started school at his mother's schoolhouse, sitting proudly in the front row. Elizabeth grew into a sweet, gentle child who loved helping her father with the horses. Vincent expanded the ranch, hiring more hands, building a bigger barn. Teresa eventually hired an assistant teacher as the school grew larger. They celebrated birthdays and Christmases, survived illnesses and accidents, supported each other through the inevitable challenges of life. In 1885, they had another son, William Thomas, who proved to be the most spirited of their children. He was into everything, fearless and curious, keeping them constantly on their toes. Vincent would often come in from the fields to find William had escaped his mother's supervision and was attempting to climb into the horse corral or investigate the chickens. "That boy is going to give me gray hair before I am 40, Vincent said one evening, scooping up a mud-covered William who had somehow ended up in the pig pen. "You already have gray hair," Teresa pointed out with a laugh, gesturing to the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. "But yes, William is certainly keeping us young." They stood together on the porch as the sun set, William squirming in Vincent's arms, and Teresa leaned against her husband with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about that day, when you found me on the trail?" "All the time," Vincent said. "I think about what might have happened if I had taken a different route that day, if I had been 10 minutes earlier or later. How easily we might have missed each other entirely." "But we did not miss each other." Teresa turned to look up at him. "You found me, and you saved me, and you loved me. Everything else followed from that one moment." "Best moment of my life," Vincent said, kissing her softly. "Well, tied with the day you married me, and the days each of our children were born. All right, there have been a lot of best moments, but that first one started it all." In 1888, Teresa made the difficult decision to step back from teaching to focus on their growing family and the ranch. She was pregnant again, and this time it was twins, a surprise that left them both stunned and laughing. The twin girls, Anna Grace and Rose Marie, were born in early 1889, identical in every way except that Anna had a small birthmark on her left wrist. The house was chaos with 5 children, but it was happy chaos. Vincent hired more help for the ranch so he could spend more time with his family. They added onto the house again, creating more bedrooms, expanding the kitchen. Aunt Margaret remained a constant presence, visiting regularly and spoiling her great-nieces and great-nephews shamelessly. Samuel grew tall and serious like his father, showing an aptitude for working with horses that made Vincent swell with pride. Elizabeth developed a love for reading and learning, often helping her younger siblings with their schoolwork. William's wild energy eventually channeled into a talent for riding that made him nearly fearless on horseback. The twins were still young, but already showing distinct personalities despite their identical appearance. On a warm evening in June of 1890, nearly 12 years after that fateful day on the trail, Teresa and Vincent sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was teaching William how to rope a fence post, while Elizabeth had Anna and Rose in the shade, reading them a story. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful. "I never imagined this," Teresa said quietly. "When I was on that stage heading to Angel's Camp, I thought I was coming here to start over after losing my parents. I thought I would teach, live a quiet life with my aunt, maybe eventually find someone to marry. I never imagined this kind of happiness." "Neither did I," Vincent admitted. "I came west running from a difficult past, thinking I would build a ranch and spend my days alone. I was fine with that. Then I found you bleeding on that trail and everything changed. 'Get on before you fall,' you said." Teresa smiled at the memory. "I thought you might be one of the robbers coming to finish me off, and instead I got the greatest blessing of my life." Vincent took her hand, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. The sapphire ring she wore had acquired some scratches over the years, but it still glinted in the evening light. "You gave me love, a family, a reason to build something bigger than just a ranch. You gave me everything, Teresa." "We gave it to each other," she corrected. "Everything we have, we built together." Samuel called out that dinner must be ready soon, and Elizabeth began herding the younger children toward the house to wash up. Vincent and Teresa remained on the porch for another moment, reluctant to break the peaceful spell. "5 children," Vincent said with a wondering shake of his head. "Sometimes I still cannot believe it. How did we get so lucky?" "Hard work, love, and the grace of God," Teresa said. "And maybe a little bit of fate, bringing you down that particular trail on that particular day." They stood, Vincent's arm around Teresa's waist, and walked into their home where the sound of children's laughter and the smell of dinner cooking welcomed them. This was their life, built from a chance encounter and a desperate rescue, grown into something solid and beautiful and true. Over the next several years, the Jameson family continued to thrive. Samuel, at 18, became Vincent's right-hand man on the ranch, showing a natural talent for horse training that exceeded even his father's abilities. He was courting a sweet girl named Hannah from a neighboring ranch, and Vincent suspected there would be a wedding before too long. Elizabeth, at 16, had become an accomplished young woman with a gift for teaching. She had taken over much of the instruction of her younger siblings and was considering following in her mother's footsteps. Several young men in Angel's Camp had shown interest in courting her, but Elizabeth had so far remained focused on her studies and her family. William, at 14, was every inch the cowboy, spending every moment he could on horseback. He had his father's quiet intensity and his mother's stubborn determination, a combination that served him well in working with the more difficult horses. The twins, now 9 years old, were inseparable as always. Anna showed signs of inheriting her mother's love of books, while Rose was more interested in drawing and painting. Both helped their mother in the house and garden, though they could often be found sneaking off to play with the barn cats or wade in the creek that ran through the property. Teresa had never returned to teaching full-time, but she tutored children in town several afternoons a week and remained actively involved in the school board. Vincent's ranch had become one of the most respected in the region, known for producing exceptional horses. They had achieved the prosperity Vincent had dreamed of when he first came west, but more importantly, they had built a family filled with love and respect. In the spring of 1895, Samuel married Hannah in a ceremony that reminded Teresa and Vincent of their own wedding. The young couple moved into a cabin on the far edge of the Jameson property, close enough to help with the ranch, but far enough to have their own space. The following year, Samuel and Hannah welcomed Vincent and Teresa's first grandchild, a boy they named Vincent Samuel after both his grandfather and father. Becoming a grandfather softened Vincent even further. He would ride out to Samuel's cabin after finishing his work, eager to hold the baby, telling him stories about the ranch the same way he had told stories to his own children. Teresa watched her husband cradle their grandson and felt the same fierce love she had felt watching him with their own babies. "We are getting old," Vincent said one evening, both of them sitting in rocking chairs on the porch, watching the sunset. His hair was fully gray now, and there were lines around his eyes, though Teresa thought he had only grown more handsome with age. "We are getting older," Teresa corrected. "There is a difference. We are not old yet, Vincent Jameson. We have years ahead of us." "Years I intend to spend exactly like this," he said, reaching over to take her hand. "With you, watching our children grow, meeting our grandchildren, working this land we love." "That sounds perfect to me," Teresa said. Elizabeth left for San Francisco in 1897 to attend normal school and become a certified teacher. It was hard to see her go, but Teresa was proud beyond measure. William, at 19, was running his own section of the ranch, breeding and training horses under his father's guidance. The twins, now teenagers, were helping more around the house and beginning to think about their own futures. In 1899, Samuel and Hannah had a daughter, and then another son 2 years later. The Jameson family continued to expand, the ranch house always full of voices and laughter when everyone gathered for Sunday dinners. These meals became a tradition, with all the children and grandchildren crowding around the extended table Vincent had built, passing dishes and trading stories. Teresa and Vincent celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in December of 1904 with a party that seemed to include half of Angel's Camp. Their children surprised them by commissioning a photograph of the entire family, 3 generations gathered together. Teresa cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the tangible proof of the life they had built. 25 years, Vincent said that night, alone in their room after all the guests had left. A quarter of a century, and every year has been better than the last. "You are such a romantic," Teresa teased gently. "You always have been, despite trying to hide it." "Only with you," he said seriously. "You bring it out in me, always have." They renewed their vows in a small ceremony at the church the following Sunday, surrounded by family and close friends. This time, when Vincent promised to love Teresa all the days of his life, he could look back on 25 years of proof that he meant it. And when Teresa promised the same, she felt the weight and joy of all they had built together. Elizabeth returned to Angel's Camp in 1905. Bringing with her a young man named James Harper, a fellow teacher she had met in San Francisco. They were engaged, and within 6 months, Elizabeth was married as well. She and James took over running the school in Angel's Camp, with Elizabeth serving as the head teacher just as her mother once had. Teresa could not have been prouder. William married in 1906. Choosing a spirited young woman named Catherine who could ride as well as any man and was not afraid of hard work. They built their own house on the ranch property, and William officially became Vincent's partner in the horse breeding operation. The twins both married within 2 years of each other. Anna to a banker's son from Sacramento, Rose to a young artist who had come west to paint the California landscapes. Both couples settled within visiting distance, ensuring that the family remained close. By 1910, Vincent and Teresa were in their early 50s, with 8 grandchildren and another on the way. The ranch was thriving under the management of Samuel and William, allowing Vincent to take things a bit easier. He still worked every day, but now it was because he wanted to, not because he had to. Teresa had returned to teaching part-time alongside Elizabeth, finding that she still loved working with children even after all these years. On a summer evening in 1911, Vincent found Teresa in the garden, tending to the roses she had planted years ago. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You remember what today is?" he asked. Teresa thought for a moment, then smiled. 33 years ago today you found me on that trail, July 15th. You remember, Vincent said with satisfaction. I was not sure if you kept track. Of course I keep track. It is the day my life truly began. She turned in his arms to face him. The day I met the man who would become my entire world. I have never regretted a single moment, Vincent said. Not one day, not 1 hour. You have made my life better in every possible way. The feeling is entirely mutual, my love. Teresa reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines. We have built something wonderful, have we not? Children, grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a good life. The best life, Vincent agreed. And it all started because I heard gunshots and decided to investigate. Because you kept walking even though you were bleeding and terrified. Because we found each other. They stood together in the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. They could hear voices from Samuel's cabin, laughter from where the grandchildren were playing, the sounds of horses in the corrals. This was their legacy, built from love and hard work and the determination to make something lasting. In the years that followed, Teresa and Vincent settled into the comfortable rhythm of grandparents who had earned their rest, but were not quite ready to stop living. They traveled a bit, visiting San Francisco to see the sights, taking a train trip to visit Vincent's sister in Missouri. But they always returned to Angel's Camp and the ranch, which felt like the only true home either of them had ever known. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren. Samuel took over as the official owner of the ranch when Vincent turned 60, though Vincent still went out every day to check on the horses and offer advice. Teresa finally retired from teaching at 62, deciding she had earned the right to spend her days however she pleased. On their 40th anniversary in 1919, their children threw them another celebration. The house was packed with family. 3 generations gathered to honor Vincent and Teresa's enduring love. When asked to make a speech, Vincent stood with Teresa beside him, his arm around her waist. 40 years ago, I was a man with a ranch and not much else, he said. I thought that was enough. I thought I was content. Then I heard gunshots on a trail and found a woman who was bleeding and limping and about to collapse. I told her to get on my horse before she fell, and she changed my life forever. Everything good I have, everything I am proud of, everything that matters came from that moment, from her. Teresa, you are the love of my life, and I would do it all again exactly the same way. Teresa was crying openly, as were many of the women in the room. You saved my life that day, Vincent, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and children and joy I never imagined possible. I would walk that trail bleeding and scared 100 times over if it meant finding you at the end. They kissed to thunderous applause from their family, and Teresa thought about how far they had come from that terrifying day in 1878. She had been so young then, so scared, so alone. And Vincent had been a stranger on a horse, taking a chance on helping a wounded woman. Neither of them could have imagined then what they would build together, the love that would sustain them through 4 decades and counting. Vincent lived to the age of 72, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1923 after a full day working with the horses he loved. Teresa was devastated by his loss, but comforted by their 5 children, 15 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren who surrounded her with love. She lived another 8 years, spending her time with family, tending her garden, and writing down the story of her life for her descendants. She passed away quietly in 1931, at the age of 75, with her children gathered around her bed. Her last words were about Vincent, about how she could hear him calling her, telling her to get on before she fell. About how she was ready to go to him, to be reunited with the man who had saved her life and then made it worth living. They were buried side by side in the Angels Camp Cemetery under a large oak tree, their shared headstone reading, Vincent Jameson, 1851–1923, and Teresa Jameson, 1856–1931. Beloved husband and wife, parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, together forever. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Samuel's line, and then to his children and grandchildren. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original section that Vincent built remained, carefully preserved. Family members would point it out to visitors, telling the story of how their great-great-grandparents met, how a chance encounter on a dangerous trail had started a love story that lasted a lifetime. The story became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and reunions. About how Teresa had been walking with a limp and bleeding when Vincent stopped his horse and told her to get on before she fell. About how that simple act of kindness and courage had bloomed into a love that shaped generations. About how the best things in life sometimes come from the most unexpected and frightening circumstances. The sapphire ring Vincent had given Teresa was passed down through the family, given to each new bride as something borrowed, a reminder of the enduring love that had started their entire legacy. The Jameson family prospered and grew, but they never forgot their roots in that dusty California trail where 2 strangers became everything to each other. In Angels Camp, the old schoolhouse where Teresa taught eventually became a museum, with a section dedicated to her contributions to education in the town. Vincent's reputation as a horse breeder lived on in the excellent stock that still carried Jameson bloodlines. The boarding house that Aunt Margaret ran became a historical landmark. The town itself grew and changed with the times, but it remembered the cowboy and the wounded woman whose love story had become part of its history. Years later, when great-great-grandchildren would ask about Vincent and Teresa, they would hear about courage and love, about second chances and building something lasting, about how helping a stranger could change not just 2 lives but generations of lives that followed. They would hear about a woman who refused to give up even when she was bleeding and terrified, and a man who chose kindness when he could have ridden past. They would hear about a love that started with "get on before you fall" and lasted until death and beyond. The story of Vincent and Teresa Jameson became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the beautiful things that can grow from moments of crisis and connection. Their legacy lived on not just in their descendants, but in the values they embodied and passed down through treating others with kindness, working hard, building something meaningful, and never taking for granted the precious gift of finding someone to love and be loved by in return. The ranch still stands today, a working operation run by Vincent and Teresa's descendants, who continue the tradition of breeding fine horses and living by the principles their ancestors established. When visitors come and hear the story of how it all began, they are reminded that life can change in an instant, that helping someone in need can lead to unimaginable blessings, and that true love, once found, can echo through generations, shaping futures and creating legacies that last long after we are gone. The Wild West may have been tamed, but the story of the cowboy who stopped his horse for a bleeding, limping woman and found his forever remains as vivid and inspiring as the day it happened on a dusty California trail in the summer of 1878.